happened yesterday? Was there I didn't look at any news or anything to see, or on Saturday to see if any other. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there
Yeah,
was something going on Canada-wide or just in BC?
it was advertised as Canada-wide, but because of I was busy with my situation and I didn't see any reporting. I don't know. Did you guys see any reporting from other cities in Canada or anything like that? I think it's sort of the steam kind of came out of the event because of the war in Israel, Palestine. I think after that they didn't have
not as many people were.
The organizers themselves, there was a message that went out that said, well, some locations have been canceled, and then that was the reason that was given, and it was just unclear. There was some unclear and confusing messaging going on. But since I had heard the announcement and was enthusiastic about it, I did find an event that was publicized and went to it in Nanaimo.
Well, just for people who are just joining us now on the live stream, welcome to Monday's Solid Ground live stream, October 23rd. And we have a guest joining us today. T is American Canadian living in BC and had this really it's just this awful interaction yesterday. Was it yesterday or day before yesterday that this happened?
It happened on Saturday.
Saturday. She's got this horrible
how's my lighting?
Yeah, it's terrible. It looks, your lighting is great, but it was actually hit by a male trans activist at a rally in BC.
I sent you the links. Did you see?
Yeah. I'll pull up the pictures in just a second for people to look at, because this is just so brutal. And this is like the I had seen a picture of this guy. He's carrying like a stop the hate kind of sign or something. It's it's
a clown show.
It is. It's incredible. And so you see this coming to a head this way, and it's just so concerning, and so I thought it'd be great to have you discuss this, since you're a member of Solid Ground and we were kind of having these discussions going on behind the scenes. Why don't we just have a discussion about it on the live? But before we get into that, David, do you want to introduce Solid Ground for everybody?
Sure thing.
In your best accent, whatever accent that might be.
So I'll go for my own. Solid Ground is the peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice, CSJ, aka woke, and or COVID mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies. And to answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 per month, and to find out how to join our community, please visit solidgroundsupport.com. And please note, Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess the thing that's so shocking, it's shocking that you were hit by a man, first of all, in broad daylight, just out on the street. And it's sort of illustrative of the venom that's in this movement. And so I hope we could spend a little bit of time talking about that. How is it getting to this point, and where do we go from here? But perhaps first, do you want to just introduce for us what was the rally and what were the circumstances that led up to you being assaulted?
The message of this rally and this series of this movement is a parents' movement, and the rally was the message was get SOGI out of schools. SOGI is the name for the sex education, I guess they would call it. I mean, I think this is coming from the UN, I was hearing. So there are these bizarre curriculums that are being spread around, and they have pornographic material in them. I mean, I used to work in a sex
SOGI is
shop.
Sexual orientation and gender identity.
I'm not an uptight person, right? But like a little kid, you need to leave them alone. you know, people have their own private world. Not all the boundaries get to be broken down. A child has an independent sexuality. They accuse us of thinking that children have no sexuality, and children don't know, that we think that children have no sexuality, or children don't know who they are. No, none of that is our business. Like, the kid is on their own journey, his or her own journey in life. And if I think about a teacher coming up to me, like, you know, Gail Lowinger, my third grade teacher, coming up and talking about sex, no, I don't want that. That would feel so weird to me as a little kid. And little kids are experiencing that daily in school. It's evil. It's evil to interfere with innocence. Narcissistic, you know. Yeah.
You are,
okay.
I mean, you're, that's, I think a lot of parents and us here, I think a lot of people are sharing this indignation and frustration at what's being taught to kids in these elementary and middle school classrooms. I mean, high school too, but gosh, the little ones especially. And you were talking about SOGI, so that's sexual orientation, gender identity. And this is actually an acronym that's being used for teaching, like they're teaching this as part of their Canadian school program. Now they have SOGI as part of the curriculum.
That's the name of it. But I listened to a good show this morning. Hang on, let me get the name of it, because they had a lot of great information about this if anyone wants to learn more.
Sure.
It's called, the show is called Stop SOGI 123. Parents are protesting daily, and it's a tiny little channel called RH Media, and it looks like she's focusing on this topic.
Stop SOGI 123. So if people want to look that up.
Yeah, parents are protesting daily.
Are you a parent yourself, and how did you become aware of this?
Well, my kids are out of the house already. So, but I moved here with my son. He was still a high schooler when we moved. It was during the pandemic. And I have questions now. Like, I don't know what he was exposed to during those couple of years in the high school here. But I know I was clueless. I was on my own. I mean, I was clueless about a lot of stuff. Like back in 2019 was when I got out of the last narcissistic relationship, and I was on just a very motivated journey of learning about power dynamics and, you know, abuse and all this stuff. And I was trying to pull back from being so hooked into politics, because I've actually been an activist all my life. Like, I've done a lot of activism, and that's part of what's interesting to me about this situation. And maybe we could even talk about that. Like, how do we approach this completely different context that we're doing activism in, where normal's not normal anymore? But anyway, I mean, I got sort of I got a media addiction, basically. Like, while I was in that last relationship, I was so isolated and broken down, and I started listening to podcasts like all day, every day. And first it was cult podcasts, and then you know, and then about narcissism. Once I realized and I got out of the relationship, I was just listening to narcissism material all day, and then different. It was like this addiction that would move from thing to thing, you know, and then a specific narcissist or this or that, scams and cons and all this kind of stuff. And then I saw an Andrew Gold YouTube video, like in July, a couple months ago. It was an interview with Buck Angel. And that piqued me. I started going down that rabbit hole, and I just could not believe that, and that this has been going on for so long, and I had no idea. I mean, I've only been aware of it for a couple of months.
So this past July is when you sort of started realizing the extent to which
just like a few weeks ago, basically, you know. So I guess I'm still figuring out how to assimilate this new perspective, you know, but all that learning about narcissists and abusive relationships, you know, I listen, of course, to Josh Slokin's podcast, Disaffected, which is all about that, looking at society from the perspective of cluster B personality disorders, the increase, our society creates perfect conditions.
So had you just discovered the Disaffected podcast recently as well? Or was that something that was on your radar already?
No, I just discovered that a couple weeks ago.
Okay. So you're just
Yeah.
kind of being blown wide open right now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, literally. Look at me.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, I'll tell you about what happened. Went over to Nanaimo, BC, on Vancouver Island. And I was alone, and the groups were pretty small. There were the gathering was in front of the city hall, and then there was going to be a march and a rally. So I got there on time, even kind of early, and the crowd was really small. And the trans activists were on one side of the street. They were, on the city hall street side, and there were parents, and actually probably mostly grandmothers on the sidewalk on the other side.
What was the relative numbers like?
They had gotta try to remember, because I didn't count them
Or
at the
just
time,
like, did they
but
seem to have more, or did you have more?
it was probably under 50, actually. Like, yeah, maybe they had like 40 people, some 50, and we had like 20. We
Okay,
were
so
a smaller
wow.
group. Yeah, it was all pretty small. Yeah, but so it was kind of an intimate setting in that way, like everyone was sort of aware of each other and kind of in each other's face, kind of, even though we were on separate sides of the street. So, and not very many of the parents on the parents' side, not very many of them had signs. Like I said, it was a bit disorganized, and some things have been canceled and stuff like that. So people were a little confused and just kind of talking to each other and getting to know each other and making connections. And so I went and got my sign. There was one woman standing in the street with a sign that said, "Let kids be kids." And then I went and I stood next to her, and my sign says, "Get the cult out of schools."
Mhm.
And there was one flamboyantly dressed man that brought a big old flag, one of their flags that they love, over to our side, and was standing kind of near this woman. I think the woman with the sign that said "Let kids be kids" was there, and then this guy was there with the big huge flag. So they this is a tactic they use all the time to try to cover our messaging with their big flags and their signs and stuff like that. I got a drink.
Mhm.
We could maybe talk about that later, like what their behaviors are that we can, notice when we, so anyway, so I was standing next to this woman, and I just didn't feel, I felt like, well, okay. I was already feeling uncomfortable. I just at being covered up and having this other person so close with their flag. And I just didn't, I didn't feel like putting up with it. And then this other man walked over with his sign on a stick and started putting that right in my face.
Mm.
And it's a rainbow sign that says, "No place for hate," I think is what it said. It's like on a poster board and on a long stick. And he just comes walking right over with his sign, just putting it right in my face. And I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna go, and I felt like fear, like these people are aggressive, and this guy, these were two big men that were doing this, right? And so I was walking down the sidewalk on one side of the cars, they were on the street side, and just kind of like stopped to try to talk to people, but I was just feeling like agitated. So I just went down to the very end of the protest, I was in the very front where the cars would see me first, and just stood there with my sign. I was trying to separate myself, from these people.
Well, Please, you mind if I just ask? The two groups were separate to begin with, so it sounds like two guys came over one at a time,
Exactly.
is that right? And then stood close
Yeah.
by you, and they were
Yeah.
separate to begin with. One person came across the chap who put his flag in the way, and then that was followed by a slightly more aggressive man. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah, the chap with the flag was there when I arrived, and as well as the other sign, the woman with the sign. So those two were there. And so I kind of joined that dynamic when I came and stood next to her. It's like, I'm coming to also stand next to this big flag guy, and then the other guy comes over. He's like, oh, now it's time to box them in and cover them up. And that's what he's thinking. That's, what they do, and so he's walking over with his big sign on a stick.
Were police there? Was anybody?
At that point, I wasn't aware of any police at that point. Yeah, so I walked away. I went down the hill and to the edge of the crowd, and I stood on my own, right? But then I turn around, the guy is back again. He's a big man, a very large man.
This is the sign guy, not the flag guy.
Yeah, the sign guy, the one that
No Place for Hate, who puts
so
the sign
so
in
the
your
flag
face.
guy, the flag guy was just standing there the whole time. He wasn't really running
Okay.
around and doing stuff. But this guy with the No Place for Hate sign was getting busy and running around and harassing us, And so here he is again. He's coming back up to me, and he put his sign right in my face. And I said, oh no, you're not doing that to me. I've seen the videos. And I grabbed the sign, like, get out of my face. And in that instant, all in one instant, his fist just exploded into my face so fast. It was a trigger, because everything happened so fast when I moved that sign. And also, I think the words I said, because they do not want a woman telling them no. And I think that just flipped his switch, to hear me say, no, you're not doing that to me.
So you shoved his sign out of your face, and he instantly just punched you.
Instantly punched me. I just felt myself flying and falling. And then I hit the sidewalk and I just froze. And then just lay there for a second,
Wow.
just like, whoa. Like,
And he, from the looks of it, he must have hit you really hard.
I think, yeah, I mean, he's a big guy,
You look, yeah,
And
I'm
I'm
going to
not.
share the screen again because I've got your photos that you sent me, which are really, I mean, this just shows the intensity. Look at that swelling, and there's your sign, get the Colt out of schools. And that's you holding it post punch.
Yeah, that was actually right after the punch. So,
Wow, you got right back up.
well, I was immediately interviewed by the police.
Okay.
They were there, and there were dozens of witnesses. Like, this guy just did this in full view of everyone. And so, like, there was a car that was passing just when it happened, and they witnessed the whole thing.
Wow.
And they also helped me out and took me to the hospital afterwards, so I got checked out.
So did the police arrest this guy for assault, since there were all these witnesses?
They did not. I'm actually unclear on what needs to happen next, because I don't think they exactly arrested him. They apprehended him. They got his information. They put an order on him not to come near me, or maybe not to go to any demonstrations. But they didn't take him in or anything, or I mean, I'm planning to proceed with the process, but I did chat with a lawyer this morning, and now I'm confused about what I'm supposed to do next, because I'm just going to be getting help and pressing through with this, whatever whatever I can do. I mean, this is not acceptable.
No.
This is not the world that any of us want to live in. I mean, I look at myself, I'm looking at myself, I'm this like gray-haired old lady, and I've got like this black eye. It's like, what? It's not right. I'm not even saying that as a personal you know, from a personal perspective, but looking at this society, it's like a Clockwork Orange clown show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really shocking when a young man thinks he can hit an older woman or any woman.
Yeah, or any woman, but it's even worse, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Did he
very
just-
black and white, it's a very clear cut situation. And that's part of why I need to, you know, keep following through with it.
Yeah.
Did he just stand there after he hit you, or did he run? Or like, I don't know if you know, because you were just adjusting to even.
I think that photograph, there's a photograph on the Twitter tweet on, there were two tweets. One of them had a big picture of him and the sign was broken at that point. So I think it must have been taken afterwards, and he looks very smug,
Hmm.
very pleased with himself and quite relaxed and confident.
Hmm.
Their flag
Wow.
is flying above the city hall.
Mm.
I think
You know,
there's
I'm sitting there talking to
yeah.
the police, giving my statement to the police. And I look up and I see that flag. And I'm thinking, is this police officer
part of
Is
the
that-
cult too.
in the cult? It's a cult.
Is
Is he in the cult? And gonna have his, you know, judgment completely clouded? I kind of think
Yeah.
not. He seemed pretty straightforward, so I'm hopeful about that. But then who's the judge gonna be? Does the judge have a trans kid?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
David, what were you?
I was
gonna
going to say, is this the progress flag? Just to clarify. Or
Yeah, the one with the triangle in the
yeah.
court. Yeah.
got you. I just also wanted to ask: was this individual identifying as, you know, one of these people who might identify as a different gender?
Who knows? They don't have to do anything special. They just have to say.
One of those
You have to
things-
ask him and find out.
Fine, yeah, I know. It's just kind of like.
But
you-
he's just wearing black. And are you able to show it? Would you be able to?
I don't know. Does somebody have that photo? I don't have it. I just have
It's
the
on the
ones you
Twitter.
emailed me.
I sent you the link to the tweet,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah, I can take a look. One of the things that, I mean, there are so many different aspects of this that could be explored or could be discussed and need to be discussed. Like your legal follow-up is going to be a whole chapter in and of itself. But one of the things that I think is so important about this is that, you know, the sign that the guy's holding is about no room for hate. And this ideology as it's coming through the schools. This was the first thing that I thought when I was starting to be exposed to this racial ideology, is prior to really having the gender thing come to my awareness the way that it is now, was the race stuff. And I thought, how is the goal not to make people hate each other and make people suspicious of each other? Because it seems so clearly that, like, we're stirring up things and we're talking about things in a way that's so intentionally inflammatory and so intentionally instills concepts of resentment and entitlement in people, that how can it not result in this? And they're doing it in this Orwellian way where they're calling it love and anti-racism and like this inclusivity thing. And so
Incredible.
what do y'all think about that? Is this just kind of the natural progression of that ideology?
I think language is being used to manipulate perception and also being used to confuse people to the extent that it becomes more and more difficult to have conversations about these issues that everybody can understand. If people are all using different definitions for words where we've all agreed to meanings for years and years, and all of a sudden the definition of racism is changing, it makes it harder to understand what's happening. And it's just, to me, completely ludicrous, no room for hate. And then he punches you. It's like he's really missing a sense of irony there. It's just the level of hypocrisy is amazing. But I think that all these manipulations of language are very deliberate, because people that are, adherents to the far left really believe that everything is arranged in hierarchies of power. And so they are trying to wrestle power away from what they see as the oppressor. And they're doing it using language, which is the tool that they've accused everybody else of using. So now they're using it. And I do think that, of course, like, as you're saying, Leslie, if you keep telling people that they're being oppressed and, oh, here's the group of people that are oppressing you, it is going to lead to anger, resentment, hatred, and a sense of, well, these people are sort of subhuman because they're full of hate, so therefore we can treat them however. And if we aggress against them, we're not really doing anything wrong. It's a very old formula that's been used against various groups throughout history.
And it's amping up in multiple domains of the world right now, right? Too. So it's I think we're at this cusp of like, okay, is there any justification for brutality, in any sort of circumstances, regardless of your powerlessness or not? Like, I feel like that's the big conversation.
Yeah, I see a dehumanizing process going on. The messaging that the trans activists put out around TERFs is very dehumanizing and extremely violent. I want to try to expose that now. Hopefully I can find, collections of the material. I'm sure it's out there. But killing TERFs, all this violent imagery, like shoot, I was gonna look it up, but I think it was in Scotland. There was that pedophile rapist, prisoner that became a trans identifying, prisoner now, and then was put on stage at the trans pride rally. Do you know what I'm talking about? And he said, punch a TERF on stage, and everyone cheered. I'm sorry, I was going to look this up before our talk, but like that's the kind of thing. Like this is a brutal killer, a criminal, and they're cheering him, and saying punch a TERF, and they've got their little, no place for hate signs.
I was thinking of that very thing when you were talking to you about that scene. I can see that scene in my head because I've seen the clip. And I was just thinking how much of your attacker, how much have they seen this already? It seems very likely that instant response, that feeling of just, oh, I can do this.
That's what I think. Yeah.
This feels sanctioned almost, that I can do.
I think so.
can get away with this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just think people are processing, like if they see something like that, they haven't seen it before. Like, do you think people are compartmentalizing in their brain and going, oh, those poor trans people? Like, I don't know what people that aren't appalled by this are doing in their head.
It is so strange. It really is a place where we see the mind control working, because these prisoners are changing their, identities, and people are going along with it and treating them differently and giving them privileges. And the way when people speak about the suffering of trans people, I'm like, have you really thought this through? Like, who are you even thinking of when you say that? Like, I some of the news clips that I've seen with Kelly J. Keene, where the anchors just seem appalled by her, like they're just buying in 100%.
People are desperate to work out how they can frame things in that way. Every news story feels like it's just being shoehorned into this oppressed narrative. It's a race to sort of decide how can we fit this in as quickly as possible so that we can all get on with saying the right thing. And that's what's happening around the world with politics and what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. I think a little bit it's trying to be framed. People are struggling to put it in that simple category because it's so complex, but I find it
I think maybe people didn't think it was that important, to pay attention to like this gender madness, right? It's happening. A lot of it is happening behind closed doors and within people's families and within the schools. So the society at large, like I wasn't aware of it. There's no one in my personal life except for people from my way past that actually did transition. But like I there are people that have been out here fighting this fight for years now, and I'm just finding all these old podcasts and shows from years and years that I didn't even know this was going on, so it was under my radar.
I think that's so interesting that you're you're coming across this now and you're having this response to it. And I wonder how many, I mean, they call it peaking, right? Like you're suddenly becoming aware of these things in a different way. And what's that process been like for you?
Well, as I described, I already had an addiction to media. So it just substituted instantly.
Here, I'm sharing this picture. Can you guys see this photo that I just put up? So I cut the guy's face out because I don't know, I don't want to put, I don't know what the repercussions of putting somebody's face up is, but you can see this guy with the "No Place for Hate" sign. And this is the photo that you were talking about, T.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do see the full photo, he does have, I would describe the look as smug, but I don't know how important that is. People have their own reactions, but that's the guy that punched you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This guy with the "No Place for Hate" sign looks big and strong, and he thinks it's okay ultimately to hit a woman. That's just utterly disgusting.
This is a dangerous person in the community. And there's a lot of community members that are really upset that this happened on the streets.
And he
of their
looks
town.
young too. He looks like a young guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say under 30 probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's not a safe person to have in your community.
Thank you, Piers, for the super chat. That's super nice of you. And Piers Taylor also says journalism has always been somewhat biased, but the levels of disingenuous reporting nowadays is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I guess, what we're talking about when we're saying you can go through the world hearing one side of a narrative and then suddenly be open to another side and go, wow, I don't even know if I understand my cultural reality.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you noticed any of the mainstream reporting after the first the first one that I went to in September, the big march that happened across Canada. The leading up to the march, and consistently the message is these hate groups are coming out on the street, they're homophobic, they're transphobic. They couldn't say racist because it was mostly brown families, but and that was another weird thing too, was all these like white trans activists screaming "go home" to these ethnic families. Like,
wow.
oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah. That but the reporting also, the reporting was just right off the top. It didn't seem like any of them had taken the time to read the website or understand the purpose of the march or the messages. None of that was in any of the reporting. It was just so cookie cutter, so cartoonish, And then after and a couple of the Canadian, or at least one, I think a few of them. I know Jagmeet Singh, one of the NDP, one of the main politicians. I'm still getting used to how this system works here, but he marched with the trans side, and Justin Trudeau came out with this statement saying there is no place for hate in Canada. There is no place for this transphobia, homophobia, and biphobia. It just it makes me cringe.
Well, it's really,
when I think about it. It's embarrassing. It's like,
it's not, I think the problem is that there's no place for nuanced discussion either. I mean, when they say hate, what are they talking about? Because a lot of the people who have a problem with this gender ideology have nuanced issues with it. It's not where, what are the many issues that people could have? It is a cult, but the problem is this simplistic messaging around it. And this is and when it's being endorsed by politicians this way, it's really, there's something really Orwellian going on.
Yeah, I think it being very simplistic like that is deliberate because it's a tool for shutting down dissent. If you label any disagreement or very normal parental concern about what's being taught at schools, that perhaps you don't want to tell a 5-year-old that the doctor just took a guess when they were born as to what sex they are. Anybody who has a concern about that, if you just label everything under the category of hate, it shuts down discussion, debate. And it also, even for some people, just immediately sort of short circuits their ability to think about those issues, because if they only read mainstream media, they see, oh, that's hateful. And they don't take those avenues in their mind to say, wait a second, is there something about this agenda that might be harmful? Might people who are opposed to it have some legitimate points? It's designed to completely shut down thought and dissent.
And it justifies
Polarization. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say,
Okay.
and it justifies hate towards people who are in opposition as well. It's
That's
justified.
right.
It's not hate anymore. It's if you're intolerant of so-called intolerance or something, then yeah, it completely messes the whole thing up. I think it gives people. Go on, Deborah, you go.
No, I was thinking it just takes advantage of existing polarization, because you can say there are probably bits of the right that they don't like this trans thing at all, right? They'd probably be happy to have it be gone altogether. And so, but you can take that there's this division and then just use that polarization to like amplify your side, and then get, say, the rest of the left not willing to even look at what's going on the left, because they're like, oh, those horrible right-wing people, they hate trans, so therefore the trans people must all be right. And it, again, that leads to the non-nuance. But if I think it wasn't so polarized right now, this wouldn't be quite as, I don't know, maybe it would be just as bad, but it seems like it's amplified.
One of the really strange and confusing things is the anachronistic quality of some of these sort of bundles of assumptions, right? And like we've all been so confused. Like, we don't have these stereotypical ideas. We didn't raise our kids with stereotypical gender roles. Why are they talking about pink toys and wanting to become a girl? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? But like, I've been looking into queer theory and how that I think a lot of that was formed in the 90s, right?
Mhm.
Like, and doesn't it feel like they sort of started growing this, plant like in the 90s in that environment when there was a lot of homophobia, or even in the 80s. I don't know how long these people were working on it, but it was from back then, right? And I can remember, like, there was a real fight for gay rights, legitimate campaign, and there was real homophobia, and it was a different kind of world, right? And it's like they kind of started growing this plant, and then they sort of went up here into academia, and then like are landing it in front of us with a big, James and the Giant Peach in our way that we can't get around. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's coming from the past.
Yeah, that's a
And-
really
and
good point about how they are
It's not a
some of
natural
the
progression with
we're
our
not still
attitudes.
doing that.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't
and
make
it is-
sense.
right.
It's confusing people, and that's one way I really know it's a cult, because it's in its own little isolated ecosystem of ideas.
Yeah.
And like when my daughter was like in junior high was when the iPhones were first coming out and stuff like that. And what people say about that phase is that everyday feminism was popular, and I remember people talking about consent a lot and these important practical considerations for women and girls. And I mean, consent is reversed at this point. It's a horrific dystopia as far as consent goes, and the messages that are being given to girls and women, and that doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense at all. Why, I went to Burning Man and saw the posters that they put up on the door all about consent. And I'm just thinking, like, yeah, they've been doing this all this time. Like, these women have been working, on these ideas. That's the grassroots. Those are the grassroots people. That's the real, feminists and the real women rights campaigners. But this other thing is imposed from above, and it's coming from another time and place, from a cultic mentality, and confusion is one of the most powerful tools for mind control.
Just kind of add on that, like, for people that aren't tracking this topic so much, there's situations where there's women's prisons and trans identified males are saying that they're women, and they're just and the women are like, we don't want them. And that doesn't matter, because the identity trumps everything. And so, so where's consent, right? Like, we don't want these people on our team. We don't, whatever, right? We don't want them in the locker room. And like, it went out the window.
Yeah. Girls forced to, I say forced, but it's that kind of social forcing where everyone's waiting for someone else to say something, but they're in locker rooms with these naked men, right? Like, Riley Gaines, one of Riley Gaines' teammates has started speaking out. So I was really glad to see that.
Mhm.
And I saw an interview with her, and she was saying, we just assumed that someone was going to step in and do something. Someone's going to
Mhm.
say something. This isn't normal, and people are in positions of authority and can do something. That's one of the really strange things to me, is all the people that don't stand against it.
To your
You
point
know?
about the acceleration of it. So that's something I think we've all talked about, how suddenly we're in this vastly different place than we thought we would be. It doesn't feel like it's been a natural progression. Something has really escalated quite a bit. People who had kids in school 10 years ago, like my kids were in high school 10 years ago, my older kids. And now what I'm seeing, I don't recognize it as a natural progression of what was happening then. Although now that I talk to my kids about it, there were elements of it that were there. They just weren't so overt. And so I guess one of the things I've been wondering is, have they overextended? By going straight SOGI now, it's like what sexual orientation, gender identity is a curriculum element in these Canadian schools. Like this is it's called that. It's not even called universal or what was it called? Comprehensive sex education. And they're sneaking this into it. It's overtly being called sexual orientation, gender identity as an educational component in schools.
Mhm.
Like we're here now.
Yeah.
And so when you say, is somebody going to do something about this? Is this the time when everybody comes out to do something about this and we stop this thing now?
Parents are organizing and parents are working on it. It's hard because they have so much challenge just getting through the necessities of life, but they are coming together. That video that I mentioned earlier from RH Media, the father on there said that they had been doing protests and speaking out at school boards, reading pornographic material at school boards, and they shut the parents down, say that's not appropriate, and so he said that now they are fracturing it out and sending it into all the topics. So he said, for example, a math teacher would be instructed, encouraged, whatever, to change the wording of a word problem so that Carl is going to visit his boyfriend 3 miles away or whatever, and how long does it take, or the math calculation, changing the language to fit with this in every and that they've been rewriting history and throwing out books from the past.
Yeah. And I just heard a statistic that 40% of Disney's characters are now queer or something.
Really?
I don't know if that's correct, but I heard it on a podcast this weekend,
Oh
and I
my
wouldn't be too
God.
surprised, but
Oh my God.
look it up.
Well, and I think, what you were saying, T, about weaving this stuff through the math curriculum, for example, it's really a way of forcing through an agenda, because some parents try to deal with this by opting their kids out of particular lessons about sexuality. But if it's just embedded in all of the curriculum, there's no opting out. And
Exactly.
that's just, to me, demonstrates the level of determination that these people have to push this ideology. And basically they're essentially saying, we own your kids and we'll determine what's right for them. Even if we know perfectly well that you object, we don't care. We know what's best, and we're going to inject them with this way of thinking.
Yeah, they don't answer the questions directly. There's one video showing the school board just getting up and walking out on the parents and not allowing them any comments or questions. They have complete disrespect and disregard for parents. And some of the messaging, I mean, I heard this is a new idea for me, but one mom that I heard interviewed was talking about the disruption of families in Maoist China and in Korea, you know. I've never really studied that kind of stuff. I've always been I'm sort of a artist and you know, I was really I was an activist, but I wasn't like reading up on it, you know. I mean, I guess that's how most of them are. But
That speaks to something important.
Like I just can't believe that these things that seemed abstract are actually manifesting themselves in the world around me and affecting my life, like affecting me, you know. But then there are people who aren't affected by it, like I said before, and don't know that this is all even going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or think it's fringe or something. Like I try to explain it,
Yeah.
like, oh, that's probably just happening, and it's like, no, it's
It
much more
sounds like it
widespread.
sounds insane. It is insane. It's an insane conspiracy theory, but it's true. And so it's like I don't blame people for not seeing it until you get that little crack where you see in and you're like, what's in there, you know, and then you kind of break it open and get in there. But you know,
Well,
I had some
what would
friends
your
that-
attitude about this particular issue have been prior to the July? What would your attitude
Well-
about transgender and pride and all this stuff have been?
So I did okay, so I had a few relationships with women in my life, and I am in the LGB without the T. But and both of the long-term relationships with women, they both transitioned later after I wasn't really around. I didn't really wasn't really part of their life, and then I came back and it came back into their lives, and they had beards and were living as men. And it was one of the most confusing things about me at first about it was the language, because it's really important to me to tell my story as part of my healing process. And then I was like, right away, I felt like I wasn't allowed to call them my girlfriends, or, you know, I was like, what am I doing
Okay.
with my words in my
So
head?
your
Like,
past was taken, your description
Yeah.
of your own life was being taken away from you by their wanting you to
yeah,
change
and I wasn't with men
Yeah.
in those relationships. Like, those are very important relationships to me. You know, I mean, honestly, one of them is the best relationship I've ever been in, you know, and that woman, she honestly, she did follow fads for sure. She would go right in, you know, when a fad came along. So, you know, and the other one, you know, I remember her, I mean, it's weird to even know what to say, but I remember her saying, I don't have to pretend anymore. And I'm just thinking, you never pretended. Like, you were this awesome Butch Dyke. They were both amazing Butch Dykes. I'm gonna start crying for the Butch Dykes. It's so sad. I love Butch Dykes. Like, maybe if there's any out there, give me a call. It's just so
See if it's
sad.
on the chat, yeah.
We'll put your phone number on the screen.
Read the comment section later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so sad, you know. And it was confusing. It was a feeling of loss, and then, you know, I had other people gender non-conforming, you know, around me, and I guess I wasn't thinking about it. I guess it really wasn't affecting me, you know, over the past few years, because, oh, you know what? Actually, something else just came to mind. I actually did have a couple of people in my life who were male to female. They were males. And when I was in the last abusive relationship that I was in, they were a big part of my husband's like circle of yes men and people that he sort of orchestrated. And that was a really troubling presence in my life. I mean, these are just individuals, you know, and
So you had relationships with people who were either gay, lesbian, bisexual, and then had transitioned. You had this was not something that you were like in some kind of straight, what do they call it, cis heteronormative bubble. So
I
you
took people as
yeah.
individuals, you
Okay.
know, so these friends, these people that were in my husband's life, like I
Yeah.
accepted them just as people, you know, who they are. And they were pretty messed up people. So that, you know, I don't have to like them just because they were trans or whatever, you know. So, you know, but so none of that is really positive, you know. I'm like, and I'm feeling, I was feeling unsettled about it, you know. I remember when I first got to the city where I am, I met someone and they were talking about local politics. They were talking about the Green Party. And they said, oh yeah, that this candidate had to drop out because he said something about the trans issue. And I was like, well, yeah, I've got some questions about that too, you know. And that was as far as the conversation went. It would be interesting to me to go back and ask myself, you know, oh, tell me more. What are your questions? Because I can't exactly remember what I was thinking at that time, but I remember I was thinking, yeah, something's not right. And if someone wants to talk about that, they should be able to talk about that. But this candidate, I don't even know what they said. They were just out, you know. And so that was weird, you know. So I was just accumulating, like noticing weird stuff, you know, and then YouTube did it. And then I started learning more about what's happening locally and meeting people around here. And fortunately, the people that are close to me are on the same page. So, you know, like where I live, the people that live close by and stuff like that. So I'm really happy about that.
So it sounds like something happened between over this period of time. You were having some doubts and some questions and some places where things were a little bit uncomfortable for you, but nothing to the point where you had a cohesive concept of how this was forming in society and your ideas about it as opposed to the social narrative in general. And that just started to happen this summer.
Yeah, no, I was not thinking about society. How is society being affected? These were just individuals in my life. And that's as far as it really went. It was just sort of a personal thing. I was totally unaware. I didn't know how, I mean, it does seem strange when suddenly two people, both of my, you know, ex-girlfriends are transitioning. Isn't that, I mean, it did seem like a fad. It seemed like a fad when that happened, you know. And then, and also, as I said, that one of them was pretty susceptible to that, you know. So I think that was probably on the shelf, you know, in the back of my mind. Yeah.
It was interesting to see you're talking about sort of books being banned and history being remade, and it sounds like your own personal history was almost being taken from you. You couldn't refer to things in the way that you had before. Was that the first time you sort of realized that things weren't quite right, when you weren't allowed to use the right words?
Let me think. When would be the first time? Yeah, I think that was the first time, the first thing that bothered me. Yeah. Like, yeah, like not knowing how to talk about myself now because of what you have told me you want from me.
I guess you're just a straight person then, if you just had relationships.
I know my identity is forcefully taken away from me. Yeah.
Well, and again, it just kind of sounds like I don't know about you guys. It's getting tired, this trope, but it's so Orwellian. George Orwell, he had it so right. This is
really
the memory
is.
hole.
I heard that book was banned now.
Hole. Oh, wow. Well, and you've got like the 2 minutes hate, you know, how they could be super angry, be really angry at what the government tells you to be angry at. Be so angry at that. Be viciously bloodthirsty angry at what the government tells you that you're supposed to be angry at.
Yeah, and also empathy being weaponized is really disturbing. Like I think it was on Josh Slocum's show. They had a clip of Camille Jayapal, is that her name? Camilla Jayapal, the senator in the US, crying on stage, like forcing tears, fake tears, and I think it was about the Palestinian situation, but the histrionics, the acceptance for, people do talk a lot about how emotions seem to rule now.
Mhm.
And now I'm starting to see it. At first, when people would speak that way, I was thinking about my own personal situation. Personally, my history is alienation from my own emotions,
Mhm.
and going numb, and I wasn't respecting my own emotions or listening to my own emotions, so that I don't always relate to what people say about their diagnosis of the problems with humanity caring only about emotions, right? For me, it was kind of a different thing, but I do see that now. I feel like a politician should not be behaving that way. We need someone to have a steady hand at the wheel
Right.
here.
I didn't see that video of Pramila Jayapal. She's a Washington State representative, and I'm in Washington State. But yeah, that is becoming more and more common, and you're seeing leaders, so-called leaders, political leaders, using emotion in order to manipulate. And that should be one of the first signs that this is a rhetorical fallacy. It's an appeal to emotion. You're not using argument to convince people, you're using emotion to guilt people or manipulate people into taking whatever action it is that you'd like, which usually means overlook the facts and act on your emotion.
Yeah, but they would probably just call that white supremacy.
Right. Well, that's
That's right.
Deborah, what were you going to say?
Sorry, I keep interrupting people because I was like, what's this? So I apologize. So I'm curious, having been an activist in the past and now seeing how activism is being done on the other side on this, what's your orientation towards doing activism going forward? Is there anything you learned from either watching how they're doing it or even reflecting on how you've done it before that's informing how you're going forward?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I would love to talk a lot about this. I would say that thinking about going forward in this dangerous situation, we need to be very strategic. We need to, I think, like if I could have people around me that we're thinking in strategic terms as activists and talking together in that way, like we can help each other be safer. We can have planned strategies for because they have predictable behaviors. We can study their videos and we can see how they behave. There's certain things that they do. They pick at people and poke at people and pour drinks on their heads and stuff like that, So, I was an environmental, I don't know, maybe I still am an environmental activist. If there was something to run out, a blockade to run out to, I'd probably go. But I was with Earth First in the 90s, and there was really incredible organizing that went on during Redwood Summer and with Judy Berry. I was there in 97, and that's actually a really great period to study if you want to learn about good activism, because Judy Berry was a highly intelligent and compassionate person who could speak to workers. Sorry. Didn't realize I was going to get so emotional talking about Judy Berry.
Well, you know what? I don't want to interrupt you, T, but I know I want to be conscious of the time because it's
okay.
time.
Yeah,
we have
this
to
is
wrap.
like
But
I could go all over the place with this.
I think that this is that's a whole nother chapter, the whole activism thing, and I think that would be
Can I say one
interesting to
thing about it?
explore.
There's one tip that I would say, like, I would like if we were going to do this kind of activist organizing together, affinity groups. I know that's a bad word because like it's used on the other side, but really it just makes sense. Like a small group of people who you know well, who you trust, and who can each take different jobs. If one person gets arrested, everybody knows what they're going to do. There's a person that is the press person, legal person, the all the jobs, you know,
Yeah.
that's just the
Okay.
basic.
Well, I
yeah.
think that there's a lot to talk about there. And I think first of all, just take a step back, it's that to explore the whole concept of activism and what it's
Right.
doing and what its value is, so there's a lot to talk about there, but
Yeah, it's totally
sounds like
different
you
now
have-
with the media. The way the media has changed is totally different.
yeah, you have a lot of experience in that area and a lot of thoughts informed by your experiences. And thank you so much for sharing with us today, for being here to talk about what you've experienced. You've been right there on the ground with this stuff where you're dealing with the fallout of this polarization in a very personal way, and you're experiencing the physical ramifications right now of coming into contact with this. Thank you so much for sharing that. Does anybody, Deborah, David, or Jennifer, do y'all have any final thoughts you want to wrap on?
No, just thank you, T, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I guess one quick little thought is also about the idea of civil disobedience and violence, and that's something that we need to think about, because normally with civil disobedience, you're depending on the fact that there's a social agreement not to attack each other. Like you put your body in the way, and that's your weapon is the other person's compassion and agreement to not attack you. So we're not gonna be able to do that if they actually are just attacking us all the time for no reason. So that's something to consider when let's talk about it sometime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us in the live chat. And we'll look forward